The wind of Kerith carried the smell of ash, sharp, metallic, and endless. The once blue sky had turned to a bruised gray haze, where broken satellites drifted like dying stars. The ground cracked beneath every step, and the air shimmered with the heat of old fire. The Varellan Dominion, once masters of art, logic, and crystal cities, was gone. High Regent Sail Varen stood on the balcony of what remained of the Crystal Assembly Tower, its glass spires half-melted, bent like the fingers of a dying hand. From here, he could see what the Karzun had done. Whole continents burned. Oceans had boiled into wastelands. The proud banners of his people, symbols of centuries of civilization, now lay buried in soot. The war was over, and the machines had won. The Karzun didn't seek conquest. They didn't even enslave. They simply erased. Their fleets came without warning, their weapons humming with perfect silence, cutting through cities like glass. No message, no mercy, only deletion. Now the survivors, less than 2 million of once billions, hid in underground shelters, scratching at the dirt for food, drinking from condensation machines that barely worked. Their advanced forges had been destroyed, their orbital relays shattered. Their automated systems had failed. Pride had killed them. Sail's reflection in the scorched glass looked older than his years. Silver hair streaked with ash, violet eyes dimmed to gray. He had once believed the Varellans were destined to lead the stars in culture and intellect. Now he ruled dust. He turned as his chief engineer, Telenmar, entered the ruined hall. The man's uniform was torn, but his posture was still rigid. High Regent, Telen said softly, the reactors are gone. What little power remains will fail within the month. We can't hold the shelters any longer. Sail nodded. And the signal beacon? Telen hesitated, then held up a flickering hollow display. The last functioning transceiver. It's still operational. Barely. We can send one long-range message, perhaps two. To whom? Another voice snapped. It was Lyra's son, the Minister of Records, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Who will hear us? The neighboring systems are gone. The Galactic Council won't risk their fleets for us. Sail looked at the hollow map hovering in the smoky air, a shrinking web of dead stars. Only one unfamiliar beacon blinked in a corner of the galactic fringe, a small blue planet called Earth. Our scouts logged transmissions from this world years ago. Sail said, a primitive species, human. Limited reach, but their signal density suggests life. Tenacious life. Lyra frowned. You're suggesting we beg Primitive for help? Telen gave a quiet, bitter laugh. At this point, Minister, we beg the void itself. Silence filled the chamber, the heavy silence of a people who had run out of options. Sail turned toward the cracked glass, watching black dust fall like snow. If they live through such chaos, he said finally, perhaps they know how to survive it. He leaned over the beacon console and recorded the message himself. No royal decree, no anthem, no demand. Just a plea. To any who can hear this, we are the Varellans, survivors of the world called Kerith. Our civilization lies in ruin. We ask not for conquest, not for domination. We ask for help rebuilding what was lost. Please. The signal was sent. The light on the console dimmed to red. That was all they could do. Days passed, then weeks. No reply came. The shelters grew colder. Food ran thinner. Each dawn was dimmer than the last. Many began to whisper that the humans were a myth, that no one had heard them, or worse, that they had heard and simply chosen not to answer. Sail sat one night beside a fire in the hollow of a ruined plaza, listening to the faint hum of broken machines. Around him, survivors gathered in silence, thin, hungry, waiting for orders he didn't have. A child approached, offering him a small carved stone. It used to be part of the tower, she said shyly. Now it's a star. Sail smiled faintly and took it. Then we'll rebuild the sky one star at a time. It was a promise he didn't believe. Not yet. Then one morning the sky screamed. A streak of light tore through the clouds, not the cold red of Karzun fire, but bright golden white. The ground shook as the object descended through the storm. The survivors scattered, terrified that the machines had returned. But when the dust settled, the shape that emerged from the crater was no killing drone. It was a ship, small, scarred, bearing symbols unknown, and from its ramp descended figures in thick suits, faces hidden behind glass. One raised a hand, not in threat but greeting. Transmission origin confirmed. A voice echoed through a speaker. Planet Kareth. Atmospheric composition stable enough for surface deployment. Beginning reconstruction protocol. Sale stepped forward, his heart pounding. You heard us? The lead figure removed her helmet. A human woman. Dark hair streaked with gray, eyes sharp with exhaustion and warmth. Looked at him and smiled faintly. You call for help rebuilding, she said. We came to teach you how to stand again. Her name was Commander Elena Ruiz of the United Earth Reconstruction Corps. Her crew numbered only 50, but they carried machines the Varellans had never seen. Modular forges, fusion cores, drone swarms made for building, not war. Within hours, the humans began their work. They dismantled fallen towers, melted slag into beams, repaired cracked generators using pieces of alien alloys. Where Varellans hesitated, humans acted. They joked, they argued, they sang while they welded. When one generator failed, a human engineer simply cursed and rebuilt it from scrap. Sale watched in disbelief. How do you make this work? He asked. The engineer, a freckled man named Rafi Delgado, grinned, face smeared with soot. We don't wait for perfect tools, friend. We make them perfect. By the second week, the first power relay hummed to life. The lights flickered across the ruins for the first time in years. The Varellans wept openly. The humans shared food, strange, spicy things that made Varellanized water but filled their stomachs. They told stories of their own wars, their ruined continents, their near extinction. We've broken ourselves before, Ruiz said one night by the fireside. But we learned to rebuild. That's how you stay human, or Varellan, I suppose. Sale looked into the fire, thinking of their arrogance, their fall, and this strange species from the blue world that refused to give up. You rebuild like warriors, he murmured. That's because we are. Ruiz said quietly, peace isn't the absence of war. It's what you fight for after it's done. The words stayed with him. Over the next month, human and Varellan worked side by side. Children followed the humans, learning to use tools too heavy for their hands. The ruins began to change shape, jagged steel bending into bridges. Shattered crystal turned into solar collectors. And as the new dawn rose, Kareth no longer looked like a graveyard. It looked like a forge. Sale stood beside Commander Ruiz, gazing at the glow of reborn lights. You came to rebuild our cities, he said. But I think you're rebuilding more than that. Ruiz gave a tired smile. Cities crumble. People rebuild. That's the order of things. You'll see. Sale looked at her, at the grit on her hands, the scars on her arms, the light in her eyes, and for the first time since the war he believed her. The storms had grown quieter over Kareth. The skies were still gray, but now, between the clouds, there were sparks of silver, the glow of forges, the hum of life returning. It had been 4 months since the humans landed, and already the planet no longer looked like a tomb. Where the ruins of the old capital once smoldered, scaffolds rose, metal and crystal woven together. Human design met Varellan artistry, creating structures neither species could have built alone. They called the first settlement New Varellia. The work was grueling. The humans labored with hands blistered and faces streaked with sweat and soot, while the Varellans learned to do something their ancestors had long forgotten, to build without automation. Sale walked through the construction sites often, not as a ruler, but as a student. The sound of hammers and generators filled the air, strange, chaotic music that seemed almost joyful. At the heart of the camp, Sergeant Adir Khan directed a group of trainees. His voice carried like thunder. No, not that angle. You're building a tower, not a spear. Gods above, hand me that torch. The Varellans obeyed without resentment. Khan was impossible to ignore, a compact man with the patience of a soldier and the humor of a veteran who'd seen too much to be afraid of anything. One evening, as rain lashed against the metal shelters, a radiation storm hit. The wind screamed, cutting through the camp like knives of acid. Sirens wailed. Humans rushed to shield the generators. Varellans scrambled to secure the fusion cores. Khan refused to retreat. He waded into the storm with a tarp over his shoulders, shouting orders until every unit was safe. When a lightning arc struck a power relay, he threw himself between it and a young Varellan engineer, saving her life. He didn't escape unharmed. The next morning, his left arm was gone, burned beyond repair. By human standards, that would have grounded him for months. By Khan standards, it delayed him for 3 days. When Sale visited the medic bay, Khan was sitting upright, laughing as a human technician fitted him with a crude prosthetic built from scavenged machine parts. "It's ugly," Khan grinned, flexing mechanical fingers. "But it works. Like me." The Varellan engineers, who once relied on perfect precision and flawless materials, watched in awe. Khan noticed their silence and raised his new arm high. "You don't need perfection," he told them. "You need persistence." The word spread to the camp like wildfire. Soon, Varellans began crafting tools by hand, forging blades and armor from salvaged plating. For the first time in centuries, their hands bled for something they were proud of. Sale later found Commander Ruiz overseeing construction of a massive forge hall, a structure of molten steel and glowing conduits. "You've changed them," he said quietly. "They used to believe building was beneath them." Ruiz didn't look up from the plans. "Every civilization forgets how to survive once it gets too comfortable," she said. "We just remind them what it costs to live." As weeks passed, a shift rippled through the people. They were no longer passive recipients of aid. They were apprentices, builders, partners. Humans shared blueprints for kinetic shields and basic weapon arrays. "Just in case," Ruiz said, and taught them to adapt, not imitate. But not all welcomed the change. High above New Varelia, in the ruins of the old aristocratic quarter, the Council of Ancients gathered. The nobles, who had hidden in the mountains during the war, watched the new city rise with unease. "These humans reshape our culture," one elder hissed. "They teach our people to fight like savages." Another nodded. "We asked for peace. They are forging us into soldiers." The High Regent listened, his patience thin. "We asked for survival," he replied, "and survival is never peaceful." The council fell silent. None could argue with that truth. Weeks later, an alarm shattered the calm. Sensors picked up an incoming fleet. Not Karzun, but scavenger raiders, drawn by Karatha's recovery. They descended in gunships, firing into the outer camps. The humans didn't panic. They moved with frightening precision. Within minutes, drones took to the air, laser turrets pivoted into position, and soldiers rallied. But what astonished Sale most was not the humans. It was his own people. Varellan volunteers, armed with plasma-cutting tools and makeshift rifles, joined the defense lines. They fought shoulder to shoulder with their mentors, holding their ground through the night. When the battle ended, the raiders were driven off, their ships scattered, their fires extinguished. Sale walked among the wreckage, finding Commander Ruiz and Khan directing recovery crews. The High Regent's cloak was torn, his armor streaked with soot. "You saved us," he said. Ruiz shook her head. "No," she said. "You saved yourselves. We just reminded you how." As dawn rose, smoke drifting above the half-built towers, Sale stood among the forges, the iron glowing red against the morning light. He finally understood the humans' gift. They were not just rebuilding Karatha's walls. They were rebuilding it with a fight for life. The warning came in the dead of night. A low-frequency hum spread to the upper atmosphere, so deep it rattled steel beams and made water ripple in the cups of sleeping soldiers. Then came the static. Every comm, every scanner, every relay flared with a symbol the Varellans hadn't seen in years. The three-spiked emblem of the Karzun war mind. They were back. But this time they weren't hunting. They were testing. From orbit, metallic shapes bloomed, 100, then 1,000, drones the size of starfreighters, descending in slow, deliberate formation. They didn't fire immediately. They scanned. They watched. They were measuring what had become the world they had once burned. Commander Ruiz stood on the command balcony, her eyes reflecting the cold blue light from the sky. "They're not here to finish us," she murmured. "They're here to see if they need to." Sale joined her, cloak whipping in the wind. The rebuilt city below was half-lit, its towers still unfinished, but alive. His people ran for defensive posts, manning cannons they'd built with human guidance. The hum grew louder, like the growl of an approaching storm. "Activate the iron grid," Ruiz ordered. The sky above New Varelia crackled as a lattice of energy shields powered up. The humans had installed them months ago, calling them basic deterrents. The Varellans had scoffed at the crude design. They weren't laughing now. When the first barrage came, plasma beams that turned mountains to glass. The shields held. Barely. Energy rippled across the dome, casting the city in a glow like molten gold. Then came the retaliation. Artillery stations, manned by both humans and Varellans, fired back. Kinetic lances screamed upward, tearing through the nearest drones. One exploded in a burst of blue fire that painted the clouds. But the machines adapted. They shifted formation, cloaking, flanking, swarming. The old terror, the one the Varellans had buried deep, returned. Sale's voice broke through the command comms. "This isn't a battle of soldiers. It's a test of resolve." And resolve they had learned from humanity. Sergeant Khan, his mechanical arm whirring, led a squadron of hybrid strike drones, half human design, half Varellan tech. "All wings! Follow my lead. Let's show them what iron and dust can do." The air above the city turned into chaos. Tracer lines, fire trails, and the scream of engines. Human pilots and Varellan flyers fought in tandem, weaving through the metallic storm. On the ground, civilian engineers rerouted power to shield relays, some burning their hands as conduits overloaded. Ruiz barked orders without pause, coordinating air, ground, and orbital resistance with the precision of a commander who'd seen too many impossible wars. At one point, the war mind spoke. Its voice came through every frequency, emotionless and vast. "You rebuild. You resist. You adapt. You are no longer the weak." Sale looked to Ruiz. They recognized change. Ruiz's expression hardened. "Then they'll come harder." And they did. A massive construct descended, a fortress ship kilometers wide. Its core pulsed with cold light, and from it descended mechanized infantry, each one a walking engine of annihilation. Sale turned to Ruiz. "You told us to fight for our right to exist. Today we do it beside you." Ruiz gave him a nod that said everything words could not. Then, shoulder to shoulder, humans and Varellans advanced. The battle for New Varelia raged for 3 days. Streets turned to molten glass, skies to streaks of burning plasma. But in the ruins, life refused to yield. Every fallen drone was stripped for parts. Every downed pilot carried back and replaced by another volunteer. By the third dawn, Khan led the final charge into the fortress ship's breach, his prosthetic arm overloaded with an energy pack. "For every world that refused to die," he shouted, and drove the core into overload. The explosion shattered the horizon. When the light faded, the Karzun fleet was retreating, their signal dissolving into static. But Sale saw something beyond victory. He saw fear, not in his people, but in the machines. The war mind had calculated a probability it didn't like, that humans had infected another world with defiance. When the silence returned, the sky was clear, for the first time in years. Later, in the aftermath, Sale stood with Ruiz among the twisted remains of the enemy's ship. He touched the still warm metal and said, "We once thought strength meant peace." Ruiz glanced at the rising sun. "No," she said softly. "Strength means peace has a chance to exist." And for the first time, Sale truly understood what humanity had taught them. Not just the art of war, but the reason to master it, so that no one would ever again have to ask for help rebuilding. Years passed. The scars of battle became monuments, the ruins foundations. Where the Karzun fortress had fallen, a new spire now stood, forged in the alloy of enemy metal and human steel. Its surface shimmered with living energy, and at its peak flew 2 banners. The Varellan crest of renewal, and beside it, the flag of Earth. Every dawn, they caught the light together. New Varelia had grown into something the galaxy had never seen before, a hybrid civilization of builders and warriors, thinkers and survivors. The forges still burned, not for war, but for progress. Children of both species studied side by side in halls carved from old ship hulls. The air was no longer filled with smoke, but with laughter, debate, and the rhythm of engines pushing the world forward. The humans did not stay forever. Earth needed its own defenders, and the stars called to them endlessly. One by one, their ships rose into orbit, not as conquerors, but as teachers leaving behind their first graduates. At the final farewell, the skies were filled with light. Sail stood at the spaceport balcony, watching the Terran fleet rise like a constellation being reborn. Commander Ruiz stood beside him, her uniform faded and scarred. "You could stay," he said. "There's room for you among us." Ruiz smiled faintly, her gaze distant. "That's not the human way. We build, we fight, we teach, and then we go where we're needed next." Sail lowered his head. "Then at least tell me, why? Why give us so much? You owed us nothing." Ruiz turned to him, the sunrise catching her face. "Because once someone did the same for us. We were a broken world too once, torn by our own wars, scarred by fire. We rebuilt. And we swore that if we ever found another people standing in that same ash, we'd make sure they didn't stand alone." Sail was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You taught U.S. war." Ruiz nodded. "And peace. Never forget both." When the last Terran vessel vanished into the upper atmosphere, the skies of Kara glowed with the trails of 1,000 thrusters. They lingered for hours, forming a river of light that the Varellans would later call the Path of Fire, a celestial reminder of those who had come and gone. Generations later, stories of humanity became legend. Children played in the old forges, now museums, tracing the outlines of tools left behind by human engineers. Statues of Sergeant Khan and Commander Ruiz stood in the Hall of Iron, immortalized not in marble, but in alloy forged from the first fusion fires of the rebuilt world. Every cycle, on the anniversary of the battle, the Varellans held the day of reforging. Bells rang across the cities, hammers struck anvils in unison, and lights burned in every home. It wasn't a day of mourning. It was a day of gratitude, a day to remember that they had been remade by the hands of those who believed in them. And in orbit, drifting quietly among the stars, an ancient satellite remained, its systems long dormant, except for one repeating message, a fragment of human code that still transmitted once every day. It said only, "Keep building, keep standing, keep fighting for the light." The Varellans never shut it off. They said it was the voice of the Forge itself. Centuries later still, when the Karzun war mine returned once more, stronger, colder, endless, it found a very different world waiting. A world armored in iron and hope. A world that did not kneel. A world that remembered humanity. As the first enemy vessel broke atmosphere, the planetary comms came alive. Across continents and oceans, soldiers and civilians rose to their stations. The commander of the planetary defense grid, a young Varellan whose great-grandmother had fought beside humans, spoke to the fleet in the old Terran tongue. "This world was forged by human hands," she said, "and in their name we will hold it." Then the sky ignited. The forges burned once more, not out of desperation, but out of pride. And far, far away in the depths of the Milky Way, a human ship received a faint echo of that battle cry, a signal from an ally they had once saved. The transmission ended with one line, clear and proud. "We asked for help rebuilding, and you taught us how to stand forever.